Welcome back live tonight. Still here on In Focus, Newzroom Afrika, channel 405. Government plans to curb rampant cable theft found expression this past Friday when it published proposals to ban the export of scrap metal for 6 months in the hope this will impact damaging infrastructure theft. The plan was first unveiled during President Cyril Ramaphosa's State of the Nation address in February, when government acknowledged the enormous cost of cable theft to the economy and the lives of South Africans. The draft policy seeks to restrict and regulate trade in the ferrous and non-ferrous metals, waste, scrap and semi-finished ferrous and non-ferrous metal products. Joining us now to discuss whether the plan or the intervention indeed will work without damaging the sector is Donald McKay, trade advisor at Metal Recyclers Association. Donald, good evening. Good to have you with us tonight here on In Focus. It's a proposal put together by government in amending the International Trade Administration Act 71 of 2002, otherwise will be known as the new metal trading regime. It's done by the Department of Trade and Industry in consultation with five other departments, and together they make about 6 departments. You're saying this in itself is impressive in a sense to indicate that they are taking this seriously.
Yeah, I mean, it's unusual to get 6 departments doing much together. So they've gotten this out. It is indeed impressive. And a lot of their proposals, I think, are pretty good. I'm a little skeptical about the 6-month ban, but certainly not all that's been put forward is bad.
So you've got tons and tons, of scrap metal, 24,738 containers to be exact. You're saying that's around 54 rugby fields of scrap metal that gets exported outside of the country. And part of the challenge that many have pointed out is the fact that at the ports, there is no technology, for example, that allows for all these containers to be checked. And so they get lost somewhere in the system, and therefore that's why they are able to export some rather significant infrastructure out of the country. Is there a way around that could help deal with that and to be able to detect it, particularly because after it is smelted, it's quite difficult to see which one was stolen where, because all those traces are gone?
Yeah, so the minute the scrap gets melted down, we immediately have a problem because you lose all traceability. So if the scrap is exported, but it doesn't, of course, have to be exported. There could be local criminals that are processing the product and using it locally. So we don't know exactly where it's going. And also, it's unlikely that at the border, these criminal syndicates will develop a conscience and make accurate declarations to SARS so that it could be tracked as scrap metal. And our ports are overburdened. So the ability to actually check all of the containers that move through our ports, particularly busy ports like Durban, are already a challenge. I'm not sure how that problem gets resolved by putting a ban in place.
Yeah. So there are 3 phases to this that have been proposed. The first phase is what we are talking about, the ban for 6 months. You're saying we saw this ban during COVID-19 for about 2 or 3 months. Firstly, you're not sure if there is a link between the ban and the reduction of illegal exploitation of the metal. But 2, you're also skeptical of the fact that they will stop at 6 months. You suspect they might take it for a little bit longer.
Yeah, it's once you put the ban in place, it's just a whole lot easier to hold on to it. We saw this with the last ban, which was meant to be in for 2 months and then got taken out to 3 months and almost ended up in court before they lifted it. So, yeah, and we've seen the same behavior with the lockdowns during COVID. It's an easy trigger to pull. And I am concerned that it runs over the 6 months. But even if it doesn't run over, 6 months is a long time. There's an awful lot of money tied up in this. So certainly the implications on the sector would be serious. Aside from the fact that I have no idea where all of that scrap metal will go if it's not being exported.
This would be severe not only for the sector, but by your calculations, even government itself, it could lose potentially millions of rands that they generally get via the export duties.
Yes, that's correct. So it's hard to know precisely what they would lose into the future, but somewhere I would guess around 500 million is paid per year. So maybe half of that would be forfeited in a 6-month period.
So without throwing, of course, the baby with the water here, what of this proposal do you think we can keep that can certainly work?
Yes, I'd like to see the ban on the trade in scrap for cash moved up to phase 1. That should be implemented immediately. This is an issue that's been on government's desk for many years now. So that is something they could take action on almost immediately. I think it's a good idea to track and register the furnaces. So I'm not a fan of government intervening with a heavy hand in most markets, but here I think there is a good idea to register furnaces and to have import permits issued before you can bring them in, so that we can track where these tabletop furnaces go to. And certainly some of the scrap metal is likely to be going through those furnaces, so tracking those down is, I think, a really good idea.
And how do we police them? And we'll track them, and we'll know when they come in. We'll know company so and so owns the furnace. How do we track that they are, I suppose, doing illegal smelting?
Yeah, so the criminal side of this is really up to the police, but I think it's a little bit easier if you know where all of the furnaces are. At least the police know where to go looking, for example. That registration process is in fact not being proposed or in there at the moment. But what they are proposing is to have an import permit so that they know when a furnace comes in and they can track who has purchased and imported a furnace. So I do think that's a step in the right direction. I also think the idea that you impose similar controls on the processed product. So, for example, when you melt the copper down into an ingot or a blister and you send that out, you have the same control over the melted product as you do on the copper scrap itself. So I think that's a good idea as well. Yeah.
And how would this impact on the informal traders, those trolley pushers, if we take the cash out of it? Because essentially they are the ones, I suppose, who benefit the most from the cash. Many of them are unbanked at this particular point, and so they're quite working from hand to mouth.
Yeah, so I can't really comment on how many of them are banked or not, but I think that would be less of a problem to solve than the fact that if we put the ban in place, the price of scrap will fall rapidly, and the immediate impact, no matter how they are paid, would be for them to just get paid considerably less for the scrap they collect. And I presume some of them will then not collect some of the lower value scrap. And I guess that scrap, which does have a monetary value, will probably end up in a landfill. So those 300,000 or so waste pickers that we see are collecting scrap on the side of the road, yeah, I do think they would take a hit.
Yeah. And the idea also, I suppose, of restricting the use of certain ports. Do you think this will be of benefit?
Yeah, we'd have to see a little more detail put onto that. The problem with restricting ports is, if you think about it, the further away from the port you are, the lower the value your scrap has to be. So if, for example, you set a port like Port Elizabeth and you've got extra scrap in Johannesburg, you'd have to incur quite a high cost to get it to the port. And so again, a lot of the cheapest scrap would just not be feasible and probably won't be collected. That would be my concern. But the argument is certainly not without merit to know that government needs to focus their attention on a smaller number of ports.
Yeah.
So, yeah, maybe.
So all in all, I mean, from your assessment, the intervention, the new metal trading regime would either, one, result in, of course, 6.5 billion rands that would literally be decimated in the industry. That would mean 500 or so million rands lost to government in terms of duties. And then we are going to have piles and piles of metal that's lying all across the roads, and a couple of businesses that are going to be closed, and 300,000, you say, informal scrap metal traders that will be out of work. And that's in a nutshell what you're saying this 6 months ban would bring.
Yes.
Yeah. In terms of your own submissions then as a sector, what are you proposing should happen to particularly protect our infrastructure, our Eskom infrastructure?
Yeah, so there were a few things that were in place beforehand which were dismantled. I think the specialized units like the Copperheads in Cape Town need to be reinstated within the police. I think the police need to recommence specialized training so people in the police force know what to look for and can identify stolen product more readily. This is still primarily a policing problem, not a trade problem. And I think the police have to take the center role here. It concerns me a little bit that they don't seem to be at the middle of this, and that we're trying to fix a crime problem with the trade measure. So that does concern me a little bit, but I guess we will have to see how it unfolds.
All right. Donald, appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on. That's Donald McKay there, trade advisor for the Metal Recyclers Association. And, of course, they are a response to the proposal by the Department of Trade and Industry of a 6-month ban to the export of scrap and waste metal, including copper cables.